What up, peeps? It's your boy Heckin Steve. Welcome back to the channel. And today, I am sad today, man, because I'm just thinking about how kids these days, they're just not going to experience life the way that, I did in the 90s and what a lot of people experienced throughout the 80s and the 90s. And, like the pre-internet era, I mean, the internet was around in the 90s, but most people didn't have it in their homes until like the early to mid 2000s. And man, as great as technology is nowadays and all of the conveniences and advances that we have, somehow life is just still hard and expensive for sure. But man, back then, the rental stores were such a huge role in my life. Being not rich, not well off for most of it. Early 90s, my dad became disabled, so we were, on fixed income for the majority of my childhood. And, yeah, games are expensive now. They were expensive back then, too. Yeah, maybe they were 30, 40, 50 bucks or more back then, depending on what it was. But you were also making like 4.25 or 5.25 an hour for a majority of the 90s. But yeah, the rental stores were super important for that because not only was this like the thing you looked forward to the most at the end of the week, like Friday night, but it was also a place where you could rent video games. So if you were lucky enough to get a home console, you could always count on the rental stores to be there to, try out some games because, you would only get like maybe one or two games a year if you were lucky. At least in my house, that's how it was. And I spent a lot of the time listening to the radio and watching regular TV, like, with the antenna, rabbit ears, so you were pretty limited on the entertainment that you had, but we were still able to make it work. And, there was a lot of playing outside, riding bikes, skateboards, pretending, using your actual brain and imagination. Which I think a lot of kids these days, they're missing a lot of that because, you know, and this even goes back to like 2011, 2012, when I was working for Best Buy. I couldn't tell you how many times a week a parent or a couple would come in to buy their kid an iPad. And, you wouldn't know how old the kid was for most of the conversation, but then it would eventually come out and he'd be like, yeah, man, he's doing really well in school. And we want to get him the 10-inch iPad, the 64 gigabyte, like the most expensive one you can get. Be like, oh, okay, cool. Did they just like graduate, from elementary school, or they go into high school or something like that? They're like, no, just did really well in first grade. So I'm like, oh, okay, so like a 6-year-old is just going to be possessing this $700 TV screen basically that you can walk around with, and I'm glad that people are able to give things like that to kids for sure. But man, it's just you're missing out on a lot of important things, I think, that develop your personality, develop your mind, and teach you to be creative and figure things out. Um, don't get me wrong, man. I use the calculator all the time, but I still know how to do the math, and I'm sure kids do as well. But man, I think that's why you don't see as much originality anymore, because as these generations are growing up and getting, jobs within the entertainment industry, you're just seeing a result of what a catered childhood does to you. Having these iPads and stuff, access to all of these games. Now, things like Game Pass, Nintendo Switch Online, and PlayStation Plus and EA Play, those are all great benefits. And they've kind of, filled a little bit of the void that we have now that rental stores are basically gone, thanks to the internet, like Netflix, Redbox. But what Netflix and Redbox have done is they've just depersonalized the experience of actually renting a movie. First of all, well, Netflix, for example, it eliminates the luxury of going out to a building, to going to a Blockbuster and or a Hollywood Video, because I usually went to Hollywood Video, and I've got some pictures of Hollywood Video as well. But first, we'll start with the Blockbuster. So Netflix eliminates this right here. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't have to go and you don't have to physically look at anything. To be honest, you're probably sitting in your underwear or cuddled up on the couch with a pet or a blanket or whatever, and you're just endlessly scrolling and not being impressed because everything is so convenient and everything is so impressive now that you've pretty much became dull to the idea of making a decision. So you just sit there and you just scroll and scroll, and you may even scroll for 20-30 minutes and then not even watch anything on Netflix, versus actually getting in your car or riding down to the rental store, looking at something on the wall. Maybe there's something that you're interested in watching, but you get there and it's unavailable. They're all rented, so you can't. Then you've got to pivot. You're like, well, I can't leave empty-handed because I still need something to do this weekend. And then you have to, talk with the clerk. And, usually you would want to kind of like build a rapport with the clerk there. That way you could get movie recommendations, because these dudes were getting free rentals. So they knew a crap ton of movies, and they knew, they could help you for sure. And like, going back to the video game thing, I mean, they would do that too, because they could rent the games. And most of the time with the movies, movies would come out on Tuesday. They would have them, that weekend prior. So they would actually have watched them before the public even had access. That way all the copies would be available for rental. And Blockbuster did a really good job of having a crap ton of new releases. Also, collecting movies in general were so much easier with a place like Blockbuster, because when the movie had been out for a month or two, they would start selling off, their overstock of a title. But kids these days, I mean, you just have what Game Pass says, what NSO says, and there's some great titles on there for sure. But it's just another one of those Netflix things where you're just kind of sitting there looking up and down. And then even with games, it could be an even harder choice, because depending on where you live or how fast your internet is or how big your storage is, you may be trying to decide on something, and then you finally do, and you don't have the room for it. So then you got to go and decide what you're going to delete that you're not really playing right now. So it's just it has made a fucking thing that is super simple, like consuming a video game, some music, or some movies, and it has turned it into this inconvenience, because you could just go down to a rental store and pull it off the shelf and be done with it. Like, that's what you're doing, because you've left the store with an item. So there is no changing your mind unless you're literally going to turn around and go back, but you've already paid for that specific rental. And like I said, man, I wasn't really a huge Blockbuster guy, but Blockbuster did have new releases more often than I'd say Hollywood Video did. But they also had like very strict rental times, and they were more expensive. But coming over here to Hollywood Video, yeah, this is more Blockbuster right here. But yeah, I mean, in my town, Blockbuster was decent sized, but Hollywood Video was huge. And this isn't a picture of my actual one, but this is pretty similar to how mine looked. And it was just massive, man. It was like the size of a Target. Not really a super Target, but like the way Target used to be sized. Or at least it felt that way to a little kid. It might not have been that big, but... Another thing, too, man, I wanted to find a picture of this, but they used to sell these boxes. It was like a snack box. Like, it would come with some candy, some peanut butter, and a drink. And I always thought that was really cool. I didn't really buy them too often because they were kind of expensive, and I was a child, so I didn't have that much money. But, yeah, man. Hollywood Video was huge, and they always had, like, a lot of titles in stock that you couldn't find at Blockbuster, so I really liked that. There was always so much. And then they would do the 4 for $20 on the DVDs, like, to buy. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, I wanted to show this one because of the carpet, man. Everything was so like funky styled back in the day, and I don't know, man. I get nostalgic for it. I mean, back then you don't really think about it, but then you have places like Toys R Us. I mean, kids these days, like I said, and I hate to sound like an old man, kids don't really play with toys anymore. And it's not because kids don't like toys. It's just because they go straight to the iPad or the iPhone, and then that's all they really have time to do because there's just so much to do on there, or so much to distract you, and it is so bad to live like that. I know it doesn't really feel that way, but man, I think about it all the time and how much time that I spend on my phone as an adult, even if I'm not like doing stuff related to YouTube, and it's just terrible, man. But like I miss, even I like to this day I miss places like Toys R Us because shopping on Amazon depersonalizes the whole experience, like of going into the store, hoping they have what you have, or hoping they have what you want, and then you finally turn the corner and see it there on the shelf, and just being super giddy about it. And of course, resellers and scalpers, they make sure that all of the physical stores like Target and Walmart that are still left that stock toys, they make sure that they're not going to be there anyways. But man, I miss Toys R Us. This was the place where I bought Pokemon cards for the first time. I got a lot of my video games from here, and man, their bike aisle, they had so many bikes. Like when I was younger, bikes were a huge thing for me and my best friend. And man, I just miss it so much. But even as an adult, I miss Toys R Us because they always had this huge figure aisle for like wrestling figures, GI Joes, and knockoff GI Joe action figures. And for the girls, they had a lot of Barbies as well. And then this was their video game section here. And the way they did it is like, you'd have the picture of the game or the case of the game, and you would grab one of these little slips. If there wasn't a slip there, that meant they were, out of that item at the time. But you would take that slip up to this like caged room at the front of the store, and that's where they would keep all of the video games, and that was like that was kind of their way of keeping everything protected. But yeah, it was cool, man. It kind of felt like a VIP sort of experience. Like, here, I gotta take them to slip, and then the guy in the cage will grab it for me. But yeah, even looking back at the PS2 era here, so this is probably 2004, 2005, I would say, maybe a little later than that. But the prices of the games, Call of Duty was 50, but then you had a bunch of other things that were 29 and 39. And there was just a big variation of pricing. And like nowadays, it's most of the time it's $59.99 or $69.99, and soon to be $79.99. But yeah, ooh, I see Indigo Prophecy up here, but it was sold out. Great title. It used to be one of my favorite games. And then, Funkoland, man, I forgot about, adding that to the slides here. But, you're talking about the 90s. Like, my GameStop now used to be a Funkoland when it started. And they had, like, TVs on display. There was probably 10 TV displays. Like, they'd have, like, 2 on the right, 2 in the back right, 2, and then 4, like, on the back wall. And each of them had different systems set up. And, like, if you wanted to, they would let you test the game out before you bought it and stuff. So it was really cool. And they always had really good prices. This was like way before, fucking how it is now, where everything is just super overpriced. But it was a fun store to go to. And then KB Toys, that's another toy store that's been gone for a really long time. But man, it was basically like a smaller toy store. But, you don't really get toy stores anymore like this, man, unless it's like a local shop. But then, but KB Toys, for example, anytime a new toy came out, they had it in stock, you know what I'm saying? Or they ordered it. Whereas, like, with local shops, they do the best they can ordering all the toys and stuff, but they don't get everything. And, it's because toys are just uncommon now compared to how they used to be. Even though there seems to always be a high demand for these toys. And then you also had some places that spelled KB Toys like that. But this looks like a mall store here. But yeah, man, I just miss it, and I just kind of feel sad for kids these days. I know kids don't feel sad at all, but they don't know what they're missing. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say in this video. I appreciate you guys for watching, and let me know below what you guys think, man. Am I wrong about all this? I really feel like I'm not, but anyways, I'll catch you guys next time.